To move into round two. Okay, please take your seat. Alrighty, our next category is in the area of foreign policy, and I haven't seen these questions either. I'm just seeing this one here, so I'm going to say to all the candidates, listen well to this question.
Hello, I'm Jean Norris. I live in Dundas. Question is a short one, so what role do you believe Canada should play in resettling refugees, especially due to climate change?
Victoria, you lead off.
Well, thank you so much again. This is an important part of our platform because as though I haven't dived in too much about the green new economy, but with the green new economy comes a mass amount of jobs. And so with that, our party projects that there'll be more jobs than available working Canadians. We also recognize that Canada has been a mass emitter and has played a huge part into our climate crisis. And so by accepting new refugees, we will be able to not only fill these jobs as we are an aging society, we need to support ourselves with climate change immigrants and refugees because we, the Green Party, petitioned for the UN to change the definition of what is a refugee to include climate migrant people because we currently do not do that. So with our foreign policy, we must open arms because as we've seen, the other parties set a really high target and then as soon as they meet that target, immediately cut off immigration for other peoples and refugees. We need to support asylum seekers as well as climate mitigated refugees because we have the ability to do so and we must do so. It's our obligation as a Canadian country, I believe. Thank you.
Bert?
So for us, our party has always been committed and continues to be committed on making sure that anybody that is in any kind of life-threatening situation and is looking for refuge in Canada, that we make sure we get them here as soon as possible and we make sure that they get here safely. So when it comes to immigration, I'm an immigrant myself. When I came to this country, I was accepted with open arms. In which country could I, as an immigrant, be running here today to be part of the Canadian government? Our government is very proud of our history of being welcoming to immigrants and to refugees, and we want to make sure that we continue to work to make everybody feel welcome here in Canada. And like I said, anybody that's in any life-threatening situation, our party is committed to helping them get to Canada as soon as possible.
Yousaf.
Thank you. Canadians are proud of our role in the world. The role that we have as peacekeepers, as peace-loving, and promoting of peace across the world. The New Democrats believe that Canadian interests are best served by a strong and principled foreign policy that's based on human rights, multilateralism, and the best interests of global peace and security. Under a New Democrat government, we will focus on peace. We will support nuclear disarmament, will recommit to peacekeeping, and will make sure that Canadian-made weapons are not fueling conflict and human rights abuses abroad. We will uphold the rights of women and girls, and we will be a central part of the New Democrat platform. Along with the recognition that we are seen as leaders in the world, where we have travelers from south of the border who are using a Canadian flag when they're traveling abroad because of how well received Canadians are. We have a right to play on the world stage, and we must stand united against oppression and allow people who need refuge into our country so that we can not only fulfill the jobs, but also be on the right front of the humanitarian crisis. Thank you.
And Danny.
Well, I'm going to start with refugees. The PBC welcomes refugees to our nation. We pride ourselves in having strong economic opportunities for refugees. However, we are also committed to protecting our borders. Over the last 2 years, 45,000 have crossed illegally into Canada, mainly on Roxham Road, and to Quebec. These are people whose lives are not in danger in the state of New York. Our Department of Immigration is telling us that 40% of these processed refugees, these claims have been rejected and they will eventually have to be deported, so it's not fair to anyone. If you want to come to Canada, you are welcome, but you must come through a legal port of entry. Mr. Trudeau's inability to protect our borders has cost us $350 million a year. So the PPC will prioritize legitimate refugees, people whose lives are actually in danger, to ensure that they receive their rightful opportunity to come to this nation. Also on foreign policy, there is this globalist vision that has been heavily promoted in Canada under Justin Trudeau, who believes that we are a post-nationalist state. With no core identity, we have no interest in seeing the United Nations grow into a more powerful quasi-world government. The United Nations, in their own words, are on the brink of bankruptcy. Canada needs a common-sense foreign policy focused on the security and prosperity of Canadians, not an ideological approach that compromises our interests.
The next question area is, again, with respect to settler Indigenous peoples' relations.
Hi, I'm Martin Switchies here from Dundas. I have question 7, which is about Indigenous people. It says, remote Indigenous communities are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. What will your government do to ensure they are able to adapt to the new realities of the changing environment?
So our government has always been committed to working with the Indigenous communities in every front. And we know that nobody better in this country than them to tell us about the trends that they've seen over the years within the climate. They've lived off the land, they've farmed on the land. They know what the climates were when they first settled, and those have been passed from generation to generation. Our party has been committed to working with them to understand and learn from them firsthand what are the things that they are noticing and what are some of the solutions that they can give us in order to be able to help stop this massive climate change that we're seeing before us. So we have always been committed to working with the Indigenous communities to make sure that we learn from them, and we will continue to do so going forward.
Victoria.
Thank you. As we briefly touched on Indigenous reconciliation, we also need to talk about pipelines, as we know that our Indigenous community is the first-hand, on the battle line, front line group of people that are telling us that we need to change and we must change because they are experiencing a lot of these crises and issues firsthand and first in Canada. And that's why we must say no to pipelines. No single pipeline will ever not trespass on Indigenous land and go hand in hand with our targets that we must meet to reduce emissions by an appropriate amount of time by 2030. Our Indigenous people also need access to safe water, and this is firsthand comes from pollution and our industrial sector leaking toxins into Indigenous ground and waterways. We must also recognize that Indigenous people hunt and gather on the land of which they're situated and should have rightful access to different fishing requirements and land laws. Overall, we need to support our Indigenous community in this battle for climate change and take the Waters Life movement seriously. These are people that have told us firsthand what we need to do, and we know full and well how to do it. We have a plan to stop it. We just need to actually act on it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Daniel.
Thank you. Well, I think it starts with opening a dialogue with our Indigenous people. This was their land first, and we need to have open communication with them whenever we make any big decision. And what our party is proposing, giving them individual property rights, would mean that we cannot intrude on their reserves in their land because it is then their private property. So I think that will start us off in the right direction, and my personal opinion on the matter is it all starts with opening a dialogue with them, that we should not make any moves without opening that dialogue and having the approval and cooperation of our Aboriginal people.
Thank you. And Yousaf.
Our efforts to tackle climate change will have Indigenous people at the heart of the plan. We're committed that we need to have Indigenous people as full and equal partners in our efforts to confront the climate change crisis. By implementing the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights for Indigenous people and giving Indigenous people a leadership seat at the table to help direct our efforts. Like I mentioned before, our plan involves investment towards energy retrofits of homes as well as large apartment buildings. It involves meaningful investment to help improve the public transit and other infrastructure. This is where having a seat at the table will be crucial to make sure we make the right investments with the help of and consultations of the Indigenous community to help alleviate the climate change crisis. We are also fully aware that there are vast amounts of water bodies in Canada, lakes that are up north that are not protected, are covered under our legislation or regulations to prevent big polluters or polluters to essentially dumping in those lakes, polluting the water that Indigenous people drink. That's where we want to enhance the regulation to not only tackle that firsthand at the source, but make sure that those water bodies are protected for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. The eighth question comes in the area of economy. This is the second question in this area. Back behind you there. And again, just introduce yourself and then the question.
Ray McConnell from Dundas. Interest payments on the federal debt are a significant expense in the federal budget. These interest payments reduce the funds available to address social needs. If elected, what will your party do to reduce the federal debt?
Victoria, will you lead us on?
Thank you. The Green Party is the only party that has a fully costed platform. Other parties may submit some aspects here, some aspects there about what's important to their platform, but we believe it's essential to present all Canadians with all the facts before they vote on October 21st. Not only is releasing your platform essential before everyone votes, but also I believe it should be costed as well. And that's why I'm proud to say that we've received a passing grade for our platform, because the Green Party will balance the budget in 5 years. And we won't do it by making cuts, as we've seen the provincial government and Andrew Scheer's state that he's on the same path as the Ontario provincial government. We must say no to cuts. Over 17,000 jobs lost in Ontario is unacceptable, and we can't go on with another 4 years of a federal government approaching it the same way. That's why we must invest in Canadians and start implementing new platforms and be socially liberal, but also fiscally responsible. Because when we talk about how we're going to pay for things, we know exactly how we're going to pay for it. And like I said, we will do things like closing tax loopholes for corporations and start taxing e-commerce, which is a vast amount of finances that are completely untapped by our current government. We must also end the fossil fuel subsidies that the current Liberal government gives away in millions every year. So costing a platform is important, but also being fiscally responsible and balancing by 5 years is essential. Thank you.
Bert?
So I just want to correct Victoria on one thing. Our platform has been fully costed. It was fully costed by Kevin Page, who's the past budgetary officer, plus the database team at the University of Ottawa, as well as Yves Giroux, who actually is the current budgetary officer. So we received an overall pass in our budget. It was deemed that our budget will actually help the economy get back on track. Our platform has been fully costed. It has full transparency, and it's actually the platform that both of them said that will actually not interfere with any of the programs that are actually being offered federally presently. So we have a platform that has been fully costed, fully accepted by the past and present officers, and I mean, we're the only ones that got the overall pass. The Green Party did submit one, which was failed. They did submit another one, which passed on 203, failing on transparencies. So we are committed on making sure that we do support the small businesses in our local communities. We know they're the backbone of every community. We are committed on making sure that families have more disposable income where they can actually reinvest into the communities put aside for their savings. We are helping families also save more money for their child's education by increasing DRSP by 10%. We are doing everything we can to make sure the economy keeps moving, because we know if the economy is moving, other companies will want to invest in Canada, and that's the way we're going to get out of this mess that we're in presently.
Yousaf?
Thank you. The NDP has been very clear about how we're going to be approaching our fiscal plans moving forward, as well as current. We were one of the only parties in Canada, as far as I can recall, who's ever released a full platform up front, 3 or 4 months ahead of the federal election. If that doesn't mean transparency and honesty, I don't know what does. We still see where other parties were releasing their platforms drip by drip, changing the conversation one day to the next. NDP has always been steadfast on where our commitments are and how we want to go move forward. As an NDP government, we will make different choices to pay for the program. Unlike the Liberals, who have given $6 million in tax write-offs for the wealthy, we will make sure that those don't happen, and we will use the money to invest in services, like making sure we remove interest on all student loans, like investing in our healthcare system, in our pharmacare, as well as dental. We will create 500,000 affordable homes. And we will do this by being fiscally responsible, taxing the ultra-rich, those with over $20 million in assets, and we will introduce a 1% wealth tax. This will allow us to not only generate the revenue that's required, but it will also allow us to be fiscally responsible and grow our economy. Because by making these investments, it will help us spur more economic growth, which will help us balance the budgets here. Thank you.
And Daniel?
Thank you. It's important to remember that in 2015, Mr. Trudeau inherited a balanced budget, and here we are 4 years later, $70 billion in debt with interest at $26 billion a year. This nation is bleeding money, and there is no end in sight. Needless to say, the budget did not balance itself. The PPC plans to balance the budget in 2 years, and what we plan to do is completely abolish corporate welfare, not just $1.5 billion in corporate welfare, which the Conservatives are proposing. We find this is a half measure. No more of our dollars will go to corporate handouts. We will also not waste $1.5 billion a year funding the CBC when they already receive private sector ads, just like all of their other competitors on other channels. It's a waste of money. We will also not give $2.3 billion in foreign aid to corrupt dictatorships or have colossal wastes of money when it comes to giving communist China money to develop their pipelines. So with that balanced budget, we'll introduce our new tax system. I feel that we're seeing this race to the bottom with every party trying to top each other with handouts, and that's your money that they're making these promises with. Remember that. Folks, we must understand that free never means free. Free means more taxes, and eventually you will run out of other people's money. The other parties are not showing enough fiscal discipline. If you have an even rudimentary sense of how money and finances work, you know that you cannot spend your way into prosperity. It's impossible.
Thank you. The ninth question also is about environment.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Dave Carson. Yes, the question's about the environment. I have to say, without which we will not have an economy. Natural habitat is being spoiled and thousands of species are being driven to extinction at an alarming rate. What will your party do to conserve and remediate habitat and stop the mass extinction?
Thank you. Yousaf.
Thank you. Thank you very much for raising that very important issue. And as someone so my wife works for Environment Canada, and her core purpose and role is to help habitat protection and species protection. I see firsthand her telling me about how important the work is, how she's been able to make meaningful change to help improve the butterfly population, as well as preserving many wildlife creatures. These are the things that I want to do. These are the things that are important to me, because I want to make sure that we continue to have the beautiful trails here in Dundas. We continue to have the natural beauty of Ancaster, as well as West Mountain. These are the things I'm fighting for, and I wouldn't be standing here in front of you or sitting here in front of you from the NDP if I didn't firmly believe from the core of my heart that we need to do this. And that is exactly what the NDP is proposing, is making sure we have protections in place for these exact measures, to be able to protect our species, to be able to protect and limit urban sprawl, to be able to limit development in green belts. That's exactly what we need to do, and that's exactly what I'm here for. Thank you.
Daniel?
Well, I think it starts with being honest with the Canadian people up front. The Trudeau government is proposing that they're going to charge $50 a ton when $300 a ton will be needed in order to meet the Paris Climate Agreement. Elizabeth May will tell you that. We have been very straightforward with our feelings on climate change and the climate emergency. I do, on a local level, I believe it's extremely important to preserve our conservation areas. We don't want to see those messed with. But again, to your point, sir, we want to reject climate alarmism because we see enough information out there. This was never reported on, but there was a global network of more than 500 experienced scientists in climate-related fields who just addressed the United Nations to say that the climate emergency is not the apocalyptic thing that they're predicting it's going to be. We need to look at facts first before we can make a move. What if all this time passes and we find out that it wasn't carbon and that was the issue, if it was something else? We need to find what the real cause of the problem is. If you look at facts, there was a lot of talk of the Amazon fires, but again, globally, fires have declined 25% since 2003. For the last 35 years, the world has been reforesting, which means new tree growth has exceeded deforestation. Again, Forbes confirmed that. And there was a British High Court that ruled that there were 9 significant factual errors in Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. And here's an inconvenient fact that I'll give you. There has not been a 67% decline in global polar bear numbers. In fact, new reports show that the numbers have risen to the highest levels in decades. The Toronto Star wrote that they're having issues with polar bears breeding too much in Nunavut. So again, we need to look at the facts first, then we could make accurate and effective decisions to deal with the situation at hand.
Thank you. I can't help myself. And now for a different view, Victoria.
Hi, thanks again. Yeah, I want to say you're right. It's not just carbon that's the issue. It's called greenhouse gases. It's a whole. You got to worry about all of them. So that's why we must work on conserving our habitat, because we are at the brink of mass extinction. And a lot of people think about other things going extinct. We worry about the bees and yes, the polar bears, but we don't attribute humans as part of the mass extinction that we are on the brink of. And that's why I'm proud to be part of Fridays for Future and to work with fellow members in the room and work on with Extinction Rebellion, because these are things that we must demand justice for, and we must stop what's happening to our environment and to our protected species. We must work on reforestation because other countries have doubled our reforestation target in single days with half the size per country and half the GDP that we have. We can do better. We must also stop hacking into and destroying the green belt that Doug Ford continues to do with promises of development. This is unacceptable. We must also amend the Sable Island National Park Act to remove authorities of Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board and to reaffirm that industrial activities have no place in our national parks. It is important to establish a national parks completion budget of $500 million annually to meet the goals of completing our national parks and marine protected area systems by 2030. It is essential to protect our endangered species because we have to face it. We are an endangered species. Thank you.
Good. And Bert?
So in our climate platform, we have outlined that we need to preserve the wildlife, and we need to make sure that we have experts giving us opinions on how we do that. We have also made it very clear we need to stop pumping raw sewage into the lakes and the rivers. I think we're blessed here in Dundas that we can actually serve as an example for most other communities in Canada. Look at the groups that work with making sure we preserve our turtles. They work tirelessly. You'll see them at any hour of the day, walking up and down, making sure that the turtles are preserved. Look at the groups that are cleaning the trails, making sure that they are maintained and that the animals that are inhabited there are safe. They're not going to trade with plastic. The amount of respect that our community here has for the environment, I think needs to be applauded. And that's what makes me proud to live here in Dundas, that I can walk out of my front door and at any given time see 2 or 3 deer right there. These are things that are important to me. This is why I chose to live in Dundas. The environment. And I think as a community, we need to be very proud of the work we're doing. And I'm going to take some of the lessons that we're doing here up to Ottawa when you elect me as your member of parliament.
Thank you. And the last question. This is a kind of a general question that allows the candidates to speak more from the heart, I think, from where they are in terms of top issues.
And Washington, Hamilton West. Every party has a platform with many important issues to address, which have been indicated by tonight's answer. The question we have for you is, who do you personally, or what do you personally define as the 2 most important issues to be addressed by the Government of Canada, and why?
Bert, will you lead us off on that?
Sure. I'll speak not only for myself, but from what I'm hearing at the doors. People are afraid of the cost of living. People are upset that they're paying so much in taxes. So for me, it's important that we help people keep more of their money. It's important that when you go to work and I go to work, that we are able to use that money in order to invest in our local communities, in order to be able to give our families what my parents gave me when I came to this country. So that is my big thing, making sure that we keep our money and that we work as a government in a responsible way, not counting on taxing hardworking Canadians more, but looking for solutions within the budgets that we have. The second one, selfishly, being a healthcare worker, I want to make sure that the Canadian healthcare system is enhanced. I want to make sure that we have the services there when we need them. I want to make sure that it is publicly funded, that we are always going to have the healthcare there that we need when we need it. The last thing I want to see is anybody who is laying in critical condition having to worry about selling their home or getting the healthcare they need. I know some will argue that this is a provincial issue. I totally disagree. The money comes from our federal government, and I'm really proud of our party that we have actually made a healthcare platform looking to invest in leading-edge technology, which we're going to bring right to the bedside. We've got CTs, MRIs that we know are right now in huge need across the country, including in Indigenous communities. I've seen it. I've been in those places where I want to get a cancer patient, I can't. I got to fly them out. But we are now focused on making sure our healthcare system is enhanced, that our health transfers are predictable, 3% year after year, allowing the provinces to budget accordingly. So these are my 2 things that I'm looking to, as my passion. I have many others, obviously.
Thank you. Yousaf.
Thank you. My biggest goal as your representative is to serve the community. From what I'm hearing at the doors, there are 2, if not 3, main concerns that people have been talking about. First and foremost, a lot of people are concerned about our current healthcare system. A system where it's not working for many Canadians, where a lot of families are struggling with the cost of prescription medication. In a system where children are feeling like they're a burden on their family because of medication costs. Where we have long wait times, and where people are afraid to even go to a doctor. So that's clearly not right. We need a system that works. We need a public system that works. So that's what I'm fighting for, and that's what one of the first things I want to do is make meaningful investment so we have better health care for all. Second thing I'm hearing at the door is around education. Public education is a great equalizer for our community. It is what has allowed me personally to sit in front of you here today. And I know that right now, our cuts to public education are making it so that it's turning into this luxury where if you were trying to go to post-secondary school, That's not right. We need to have a post-secondary as well as a public education system that allows for those opportunities so people can come forward and be successful members of our society. So these are the biggest two things that I'm hearing at the door, along with climate change, and I've talked about that, my position on that already. Thank you.
Daniel?
Well, I would just like to remind Yousaf that education and healthcare are provincial jurisdiction, but that being said, I want to stick to my top two issues at the federal level. And for me, I've stated it before, the most important reason why I'm here tonight is free speech. We've seen this slow erosion of free speech. Some have noticed, some have not. Some have been censored online, some have not. But again, when you keep narrowing the lines, you may think you're a progressive person, but as those lines continue to narrow in, sooner or later you're going to find you're on the wrong side of the line. All of a sudden, you've become the racist, xenophobe, homophobe, and that's not really who you are deep down inside. And it's not right what we're doing. There's a reason why people like Jordan Peterson have become the biggest Canadian speaker since Marshall McLuhan, because he opposed Bill C-16. His message resonated with freedom-loving people all around the globe, because we do not police language in a free, democratic society. We respect differences of opinion. And also, an attack to free speech was the attestation brought to the churches, this pharaoh-like decree, a 30 pieces of silver moment for the churches when Mr. Trudeau was asking if you, church members, would be willing to betray your own beliefs in order to receive a cheap government handout. He completely trampled on your religious charter rights. It was despicable. And the one Liberal who voted against this measure was demoted. And his position and cost him $11,000 in his salary a year. My other biggest concern is our sovereignty. The sovereignty of Canada, as far as I'm concerned, is not for sale. I don't want to see us regulated by the United Nations. I don't want to see parties like the Green Party capitulating completely to the United Nations' Agenda 2030. I believe this country is in an existential crisis, and the decision we make this Monday upcoming is the small rudder move that will change the course of this shit called Canada, where it's headed for the foreseeable future to come. Thank you.
And Victoria, your two passions.
Thank you so much. I think it's become very clear throughout this evening that Good Green Party's climate action plan is my biggest passion. It's the single reason why I'm running in this election. We don't have the time to wait around for another federal election to make a change. We have to act now, and that's why the Green Party's platform is the only platform for sustainable climate action. The only platform that will reach the United Nations targets set forth in the IPCC report to reduce emissions by 60% by 2030. To hear about these other issues, they're very important, but they're not the single most defining issue for climate. Climate change is the one thing that we all connect all of us, and we all need to be heavily concerned about. And I think that I've expressed this greatly throughout the evening. The other thing I would say overall for our Green Party platform is fiscal responsibility, but selfishly, I would say it's free post-secondary education. As a recent graduate of McMaster, I saw firsthand students dropping out, not because they couldn't keep up with the workload, but because they couldn't afford it. And that's why we need to make it not a provincial issue. We need to make it part of our federal funding to all provinces to have free post-secondary education for all Canadian students and debt forgiveness for those that are left behind. Because when we talk about things like reducing debt caps and making money off our students' debt that they have, we also aren't acknowledging the fact of how much students are still paying for their education. And we need to acknowledge that this is unacceptable and that we need to make sure that finances aren't a barrier to opportunity, because in the face of politics, of fake news, of a generation where we have social media at our fingertips with misinformation flooding out, we need to make sure that we create an educated population that understands not only our climate crisis, but all of our other aspects of being a Canadian as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's the end of our questions for this evening. And so we come to the closing statements.
So I'd like once again to thank the Association of Dundas Churches and Dundas Works for hosting this great event, and for you all to come out tonight. I really appreciate taking the time to get to learn a little bit about all of us. This election is fundamentally about who you can trust to make life more affordable for you and your family. I think it's clear the conservative plan is the clearest and most comprehensive option. We will cut personal taxes by introducing a universal tax cut for families and pensioners. We will increase the age credit by $1,000, leaving more money in the pockets of senior couples living on a fixed income. We will invest $1.5 billion in life-saving medical equipment and enable small businesses to thrive. We will ensure that our environment is protected and that the Canadians are enabled to help fight climate change at an individual level. We recognize that families come in all shapes and sizes, so we expand the eligibility for disability tax credit and offer an adoptive parents EI leave to help them welcome their new child into their home. That's on top of tax credits for sports and fitness for children. All these measures are to make life more affordable for you and your family. As a nurse, it's been my life to dedicate myself to be there when people need me at the most, especially in the emergency department. As your next member of parliament, I promise you that I'm here to listen, to learn, and to act on behalf of Hamilton West and Ancaster Dundas, and to be a strong advocate to ensure that our voice is heard up in Ottawa. And I ask for your vote this Monday on October 21st. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Daniel?
Thank you so much. I believe that government is not the solution. Government is the problem. It's not about believing in us. We, the People's Party, believe in you. We're investing in you. I believe in you. Do you believe in yourself? That's the question. Remember, the only way Canada wins this time is if politics, as usual, loses. When it comes to your vote, do not be motivated by fear. Fear of a split vote, fear of 4 more years of Mr. Trudeau. Vote for something, not against something. I vow to give you everything I've got. I believe in you, and I sincerely thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you.
Victoria?
As you've seen throughout this debate panel, voting green is a progress vote, not a protest vote. We will expand mental health care services and support the LGBTQ2AI+ community. We need to ensure that one vote really equals one say through proportional representation. The Green Party will bring an end to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in our country. We will legislate housing as a legally protected fundamental human right for all Canadians and permanent residents. The guaranteed livable income that the Green Party will provide is our only option to deal with both poverty and food insecurity. The Green Party is the only party with sustainable policy on the increasing job market through our green new economy. Our climate emergency is the single most important issue of our time. This is the driving reason why I am running as a candidate in this election. We have to act now. I hope you take to the polls the same sense of urgency and demand for change that made me run as a candidate in this riding. We do not need to vote against one party or another in this election, when you can vote for a fiscally responsible party that puts our climate first. You can't expect your government to change unless your vote changes, so vote green on October 21st. Thank you all for listening.
Yousaf?
Thank you so much for organizing this debate, and thank you all of you for joining us today. This election is about a clear choice. We can see what choosing a Liberal government has meant for him: broken promises. And we know what a Conservative government is. That is why I'm asking you to choose differently. NDP has a platform that puts people first. It's a commitment that says people matter. It's a commitment that says we deserve better. I'm so proud of Jagmeet Singh and the NDP for showing Canadians that we have a better choice. We can choose hope and progress over fear and division. We can invest in services that we all need, like healthcare, education, childcare, as well as taking meaningful action for our climate change crisis. That is why I'm asking you to choose me, Yousaf Malik, your NDP candidate on October 21st. Because together, we can improve our community. Thank you.
And finally, I'll ask Dr. Sevigny to come and give a closing remark on behalf of Liberal candidate Filomena Tassi.
Thank you very much. We made great progress in the last 4 years, and Friends, if re-elected, the Liberal government will focus on several very important things. More money for middle-class families, including a major tax cut, lower fees for childcare, an enhanced Canada Child Benefit, and lower cell phone bills. Re-election to address the climate crisis, making Canada a net zero emitter by 2050, and planting 2 billion trees and putting a price on pollution in the meanwhile. Ensuring a more secure retirement for seniors, including a 10% boost to the old age security at age 75, and a 25% in CPP survivor benefits. Helping students by increasing available student grants, reducing interest costs on student loans, and more help for adult students. As I've said many times, I don't see political opponents as enemies, rather I see them as friends, colleagues with competing solutions. I look forward to working with my colleagues in caucus and the opposition, as well as all the members of the community, to work in the next 4 years during a time of fruitful, prosperous, and compassionate government for Hamilton and Canada. I look forward to your vote on October 21st.
Thank you for bringing that. That brings us to the end of the evening. I would like to express thanks to all of you in the audience for your respectful listening. Listening is actually hard work, and to listen so intently for so long is indeed hard. But I was looking out at you as the candidates were speaking, and I saw some of you rolling your eyes, and I saw some of you looking like you were groaning inside. I saw others at other times looking quite excited and wanting almost to applaud. But you held back, and in doing that, you allowed each of them to be heard clearly, equally, with respect. And that's a great gift to the candidates. And so I thank you all for that, and thank you for coming out tonight. I'd like also to express my thanks as moderator to the candidates. They all came well prepared. They had all been told topics, but not specific questions. They all came well prepared, and I think they did an excellent job of presenting themselves, their passions, their particular interests, those of their political parties, and it gave us a sense of how each might be if elected to this next Canadian Parliament. And I would hope that their approachability, whoever is elected, continues. The meeting, as you've heard already, was sponsored by Dundas Works and the Association of Dundas Churches. Jim Sweetman of Dundas Works opened the meeting, and Sean Erb from the Association of Churches will close it.
A big thank you goes to Rick Speeds as our capable moderator. You may clap for him for sure. And also, I would like to extend thanks to the candidates as well. It was very brave of you to put yourself forward, and we appreciate that. And finally, as the chair of the Association of Dundas Churches, as well as the pastor here at Dundas Baptist Church, thank you for allowing us to host you this evening. I hope it's been worth your while. There is an evaluation sheet on the way out. We would like to hear your comments, both positive and negative, so that we can make the next one even better than this one. But our democracy only works as we participate in it. So thank you for your participation today. Thank you for your participation on Election Day, and thank you for your ongoing participation. God bless you.